Before the first word of the Quran was explained, before any law, any story, or any command was revealed, a strange set of letters appeared at the gates of 29 chapters. Letters with no clear meaning, no grammar, no translation, just sounds Alif, Lam, Mim, Kaf, Nun. For centuries, scholars, skeptics, and seekers have asked the same question. Why would a perfectly clear book begin with something so unclear? Today we step into that mystery. Welcome to the Missing Dots.
It is incredibly peaceful out here tonight.
It really is.
The evening prayer just finished and, the courtyard is emptying out. The light is doing that slow fade.
Yeah, it's the perfect setting.
It really is the right setting to sit down and talk about something that requires this much quiet focus.
I agree. And I want to welcome you, whoever is listening, to just, pull up a chair and join us.
We brought a pretty heavy stack of materials out here tonight, didn't we?
We did. I mean, I have notes here from Codicology Journals, which is just the study of ancient manuscripts, and papers on historical linguistics, radiocarbon dating reports.
Plus some commentaries from scholars who lived, over 1,000 years ago.
Right. It is quite the stack.
Yeah.
But we needed it because the subject is completely fascinating.
It really is.
We are looking at a text that goes out of its way to call itself a Kitabun Mubin, a clear manifest guide.
Yes.
It repeatedly says it is here to bring light, to make things obvious, to resolve disputes. But then you open it up, and 29 times you just hit a wall of isolated sounds.
The al-huruf al-muqatta'at, the cut or disjoined letters.
Right. And for you listening, if you aren't familiar with this, imagine buying a new car.
Okay, a car manual.
Yeah. You open the manual and it says, this is the most straightforward, easy-to-read manual ever printed. You turn to chapter 1, and the very first line is just KJP.
Just letters.
No explanation, just letters. You'd immediately think the printer made a mistake.
Or that something was left out. It creates an immediate friction in the mind.
Exactly.
And humans really do not like friction. When we see a code, our first instinct is, well, to try and break it.
Which is why there are so many theories out there. People trying to add up the numerical values of the letters or, rearrange them into secret messages.
Right.
But looking through all these research papers, our mission tonight isn't to try and find a magical translation, is it?
No, definitely not. We are leaving the decoder rings at home.
Good.
Instead, we want to look at the physical history, the actual fingerprints left on the pages by the very first scribes.
Okay.
We want to look at the mechanics of the human mouth, the history of oral traditions, and the cultural landscape of 7th century Arabia.
So we're looking at the environment around the letters.
Exactly. The goal is to figure out what these letters actually do, structurally and historically, rather than just, guessing what they might translate to.
So we're treating this like a historical investigation.
Yes.
And if you are going to do that, you have to start with the oldest physical evidence you can find.
Naturally.
I was looking at the research on the Birmingham folio. This is an ancient piece of parchment sitting in the Cadbury Research Library in the UK.
It is a remarkable piece of history. For a long time, it was just bound up with some other Middle Eastern manuscripts, largely unnoticed.
Really? Just sitting there.
Yeah. But when researchers finally subjected the parchment itself to radiocarbon dating, the results were just stunning.
Just to clarify for our listener, radiocarbon dating doesn't date the ink, right? It dates the animal skin the ink is written on.
Correct. It measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes in organic material.
Okay.
In this case, sheep or goat skin. And the laboratory at the University of Oxford dated that skin with a 95.4% probability to between 568 and 645 CE.
Wow. That timeline is massive.
It is.
That places the physical parchment right inside the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad,
Yeah.
or at the very latest, the generation immediately following his passing.
Yes. We are talking about the absolute dawn of the text.
And that fragment contains parts of Surah Maryam, the 19th chapter.
Which is significant for our conversation tonight.
Because Surah Maryam opens with one of the most complex sequences of these disjoined letters.
5 of them, actually. Kaf, ha, ya, in, sad.
Right. So if I am looking at that ancient piece of skin, what do I actually see? Are the letters just mixed in with the rest of the text like a run-on sentence?
No, and that is where the codicology, the study of the physical book, gets really interesting.
Okay, how so?
The scribes did not write these letters like normal words. They went out of their way to physically isolate them. Scholars refer to it as a visual quarantine.
Visual quarantine. I like that phrase. How did they do it?
In the earliest manuscripts, you see scribes leaving unusually large, deliberate gaps of blank space around these sequences.
Like a physical buffer zone.
Exactly. In some manuscripts, they place the letters on their own dedicated line, refusing to share space with regular words.
So even before reading it, just glancing at the page, your eye is drawn to them.
Right. And as the scribal tradition developed into the next centuries, they took it even further.
What do?
You start seeing copies where the main text is written in standard dark brown or black iron gall ink, but these specific letters are written in bright red or even gold leaf.
Oh, wow. They are essentially putting up a neon sign.
Yes. They want the reader to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that these letters operate under different rules than the rest of the text.
That makes sense.
But the spacing and the ink aren't even the strangest physical detail. There is a specific handwriting anomaly that shows up in these ancient copies.
Okay, I read about this in one of the linguistics papers, and I actually struggled to understand it.
It can be a little technical.
Can you break down how the Arabic script is supposed to work normally?
Sure. Think about how cursive works in English, where the letters physically connect to each other.
Right.
Arabic script is entirely connected. Because of that, almost every letter has 3 different shapes.
Okay.
It has an initial shape when it starts a word, a medial shape when it is in the middle of a word connecting on both sides, and a final shape when it finishes a word.
So the physical look of the letter shifts depending on its geography inside the word.
Yes, exactly. Now, the disjoined letters appear at the absolute beginning of the chapter.
So, according to all the visual and grammatical rules of Arabic, a scribe should write them using their initial shapes.
Because they are initiating the sequence. That makes sense.
But they didn't.
Wait, what do you mean?
The early scribes frequently used the medial or final shapes of the letters, even though they were sitting right there at the start of the line, disconnected from anything else.
Okay, stop there.
Sure.
If I'm reading an English document and I see someone use a lowercase letter at the start of a sentence, or throw a capital letter in the middle of a word, like spelling apple with a capital P in the middle, I am not going to think it's a profound mystery.
Right.
I am going to think the writer was careless.
You would assume it was a typo.
Exactly. Or, thinking about these ancient scribes working with reed pens and thick ink, maybe they were just testing the nib of their pen.
Like a scratch pad?
Yeah. Scratching a few letters in the margin to get the ink flowing before they started writing the actual sacred text. Why couldn't this just be human error?
It is a very logical objection, and to answer it, we have to travel from Birmingham down to Yemen,
Okay.
specifically to the Great Mosque of Sana'a.
This is the 1972 discovery, right?
Yes, they were doing renovations on the roof of the mosque. Heavy rains had damaged it, and workers were clearing out an old crawl space between the ceiling and the roof.
And what did they find?
They found thousands of ancient parchment fragments stuffed up there. It was basically a massive storage space for old, worn-out manuscripts that were too degraded to use, but too sacred to just throw away.
I remember seeing photos of that. Just sacks of crumbling ancient skin.
Yeah, it's incredible. And among those fragments was something incredibly rare, a palimpsest.
For our listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is a palimpsest?
Parchment animal skin was incredibly expensive and labor-intensive to produce in the ancient world.
Right, you couldn't just run to the store for a notebook.
Exactly. So if you had a text you didn't need anymore, or if the ink was fading, you wouldn't throw the skin away. You would scrape it or wash the ink off and write a new text over the top of it.
Okay.
That recycled document is a palimpsest.
So it is essentially a very old form of overwriting a file on your hard drive. But the old data is still sort of hiding underneath.
That is a great way to think about it. And with modern technologies, specifically multispectral imaging, which uses different wavelengths of light, like ultraviolet, to make heavy metals in the old, washed-away ink fluoresce, researchers can actually read the erased text underneath.
So we get to look at the rough draft.
We get to look at a text from the 1st century of Islam. And here is what is so crucial for your question about scribal typos.
Okay, tell me.
In that lower erased layer, researchers found natural human variations in the regular text.
What kind of variations?
Minor things. A scribe might use a slightly different synonym for a common word. A spelling might reflect a local dialect.
Like how we might spell color with a U or without a U.
Exactly. Or the order of a few phrases might shift. It shows exactly what you would expect from human beings copying a vast oral text by hand before the written spelling was completely standardized by the state.
Okay, so the human element is definitely present. They weren't robots.
They weren't, but when you look at the disjoined letters in that erased lower layer, well, actually, they do not vary.
Wow.
They are completely, perfectly identical to the standard text we have today.
Subhanallah. None of them are different.
Not a single one.
Wow.
If these were pen tests or someone clearing their throat on the page or random typos, you would expect massive variation.
Right.
A scribe in Yemen would test his pen differently than a scribe in Medina or Damascus. But there is no variation. They are entirely stable.
That completely dismantles the typo theory.
It really does.
You don't get absolute uniformity across different regions by accident. The scribes might have allowed themselves slight flexibility with how they spelled a regular vocabulary word, but they treated those isolated letters as completely untouchable.
They recognized them as deliberate, sacred boundaries. They didn't know what they meant, but they knew they were not allowed to touch them.
Okay, so we know they were intentional. We know the scribes quarantined them visually.
Yes.
But I keep thinking about the world these scribes lived in. 7th century Arabia wasn't a sealed bubble.
No, not at all.
Did the Arabs just invent this concept out of thin air,
Yeah.
putting random letters at the start of a holy text?
No, they didn't. The Arabian Peninsula was heavily connected to the surrounding world through trade routes.
Right.
You had the Nabateans to the north, around modern-day Jordan. You had the Syriac-speaking Christian communities scattered throughout the region. You had the ancient South Arabian kingdoms down in Yemen.
So they were constantly exposed to other writing systems.
All the time. And if you look at the archaeological records, the stone inscriptions, the legal documents on papyrus, you see that these neighboring cultures used isolated letters quite frequently.
How are they using them? Was it religious?
Sometimes. The Syriac Christians would use isolated letters in their liturgical manuscripts to mark where a specific reading should start or end.
Okay.
The Nabateans would carve single letters at the edges of their tombs or legal contracts to serve as royal monograms, or a signature of the stonecutter.
So if you were a merchant traveling through the region, seeing a disconnected letter sitting by itself on a page or a wall was something you understood as a marker of authority or organization.
It was a known technology of high-status writing. It meant, pay attention.
I can see where this is going because it opens the door to one of the biggest skeptical arguments I have come across.
I think I know the one.
There is a whole school of thought. You see it with Western scholars like Christoph Luxemburg,
Yeah.
who argue that the Quran is heavily borrowed from Syriac Christian texts.
Yes, the Syriac borrowing theory.
They look at this and say, look, the Syriac monks were doing it first. The early Muslims just saw these abbreviations in Christian prayer books, copied them into the Quran to make it look official, and over the decades, they simply forgot what the abbreviations stood for.
Right.
How do we address that? Because on the surface, if neighbors are doing it, borrowing seems plausible.
It sounds plausible until you actually look at the mechanics of the languages involved. When you subject that theory to forensic linguistic scrutiny, it falls apart. Let's look at how a Syriac abbreviation actually functions.
Walk me through it.
When a Syriac scribe wrote an isolated letter, it was a functional abbreviation for a recognizable word.
Like an acronym.
Exactly. For example, they might write the equivalent of the letter S to stand for Shubha, which means glory, or Q for Kadisha, meaning holy.
It is exactly like how we write ST for street or DR for doctor.
Right. And when you see ST on an envelope, you don't read it out loud as ST, you say street.
Right.
The letter expands into a word in your mouth.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Quranic letters do not do that. The oral tradition, which has been preserved flawlessly, insists that you pronounce them as individual sounds.
So you don't say a whole sentence.
No. You don't read Alif Lam Mim and expand it into a hidden sentence. You pronounce the names of the letters themselves.
Wow.
That completely breaks the functional pattern of how a Syriac abbreviation works. If it was just a copied abbreviation, the early Muslims would have just read the word aloud.
That makes a lot of sense. They aren't treating it like shorthand. They're treating the sounds themselves as the intended message.
Exactly. But there is an even stronger linguistic argument against the borrowing theory.
What's that?
It has to do with the specific letters the Quran uses.
What do you mean? Aren't Arabic and Syriac related?
They are. They are both Semitic languages, so they share roots. But Arabic has a very distinct set of phonetic sounds that Syriac simply does not possess.
Okay.
Specifically, the deep, emphatic, pharyngalized consonants.
You're going to have to explain what a pharyngalized consonant is.
Ah, right. It is a sound produced by constricting the pharynx, the back of your throat, while you pronounce the letter. It gives the letter a heavy, deep resonance.
Okay.
Arabic is famous for this. Now, look at the disjoined letters. They frequently use letters like sad and ain.
Okay.
Syriac does not have the phonetic equivalent for those deep Arabic sounds. They don't exist in the Syriac alphabet in the same way.
Oh, I see.
You cannot borrow an abbreviation from a language that does not even possess the letter you are using.
Ah, you can't steal a word if the alphabet you supposedly stole it from doesn't have the tools to spell it.
Precisely. The letters chosen for the muqatta'at are aggressively, undeniably Arabic.
So what is actually happening here is not plagiarism. It is adaptation.
Yes. Explain the difference as you see it.
Well, plagiarism is blindly copying something without understanding it. Adaptation is taking a concept your audience is familiar with and elevating it to do something entirely new.
Exactly.
The Quran took a regional visual cue using isolated letters to signal authority or boundaries and completely transformed it. Took a familiar tool and built an entirely new architecture with it.
I really like that framing. It is speaking the visual language of the region, but doing something completely unprecedented with it.
Which brings us to the actual sounds. You mentioned how they are pronounced. And when I was reading through the linguistics papers, I found this deeply mathematical reality about the letters that are chosen.
Ah, the mathematics of the 14 letters. It is beautiful.
It really is. The Arabic alphabet has 28 letters total.
Right.
If you go through all 29 chapters that begin with these disjoined letters, and you gather up all the distinct letters used across all the different sequences,
Yeah.
well, you end up with exactly 14 letters.
Exactly half of the alphabet.
Not 13, not 15, exactly half. SubhanAllah.
It's remarkable.
That kind of symmetry doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, why those specific 14? Did they just draw them out of a hat?
Not at all. If you map those 14 letters geographically inside the human mouth, what phonologists call the points of articulation, they represent the entire human vocal tract.
Wait, what do you mean they map the vocal tract? How does that work?
The Arabic language categorizes sounds by where the physical obstruction of air happens in your body.
Okay.
So you have sounds that originate from the absolute deepest part of the throat, the glottis, letters like the ha and the ain.
So you feel that deep in the neck.
Yes. Then you move up to the back of the palate, the velar sounds, like cough and cough. Then you move forward to the tip of the tongue, pressing against the teeth, the alveolar sounds, like lam and nun.
Following you.
And finally, you have sounds made by pressing the lips completely together, the bilabial sounds, like mim.
Okay, so deep throat, roof of the mouth, teeth, lips.
Yes. The 14 letters used in the muqatta'at sample from every single one of those articulation zones.
Wow.
They run a complete circuit from the deepest glottal origins all the way out to the bilabial terminus. It is a comprehensive physical map of human speech.
That is incredible. Listening to you describe that, it sounds exactly like a vocal warm-up.
How do you mean?
If you watch a classical singer backstage before a performance, they run through scales that stretch every part of their vocal cords and mouth. They're tuning their instrument.
That is a very apt analogy.
But here's the thing that confuses me about that. The person reciting the Quran is the one doing the physical warm-up, but they aren't alone. They're reciting it to an audience.
Right.
Why does the listener need a warm-up? Why subject the audience to these raw sounds?
To understand that, we have to really try and place ourselves in the mindset of a 7th century oral society.
Let's do it. Paint the picture.
In the Hijaz, the region of Mecca and Medina memory and the spoken word were the absolute center of gravity.
Okay.
People did not have libraries of books in their homes. They carried their libraries in their heads. Poetry, genealogy, trade negotiations, tribal alliances, everything was verbal.
So it's a very noisy, highly verbal environment.
Extremely. Imagine sitting in a crowded courtyard or standing in a bustling market in Mecca. Everyone is talking.
Just constant chatter.
The brain is processing everyday language. It expects subjects, verbs, nouns, and grammatical flow.
Right, the natural rhythm of human conversation.
Exactly. Now, imagine you are in the middle of that noise and someone suddenly stands up and instead of speaking a sentence, shouts out, Alif Lam Mim.
It would be jarring.
Jarring is the perfect word. It is a neurological shock.
Like a glitch.
When the brain hears someone deliberately isolating the names of letters, stripping them of grammar and meaning, and pronouncing them slowly, It causes a cognitive break.
Oh, well, I see.
It forces the listener's brain to start processing the tribal gossip or the trade negotiation.
It completely interrupts the mental pattern.
It acts as an auditory reset button.
An auditory reset button. I think that is brilliant.
It works, doesn't it?
It is like ringing a very specific, deeply resonant bell that tells the whole room, stop what you are doing. The frequency is changing. What is coming next is not a normal conversation.
Exactly.
It's not normal poetry. This is something else.
It prepares the mind to receive revelation. It clears the neural decks, so to speak.
Right.
And we know just how seriously the early Muslims took this acoustic shock value because of the science of tajweed.
Tajweed being the strict rules governing how the Quran is supposed to be recited out loud.
Yes. The rules of tajweed for these specific letters are fascinating because they deliberately violate the natural flow of spoken Arabic.
How so? Can you give an example?
In normal conversational Arabic, sounds naturally bleed into one another.
Okay.
If a word ends with a certain sound, and the next word begins with a similar sound, the mouth naturally merges them to make speech faster and smoother. It is a rule called idgham, or assimilation.
We do that in English constantly without realizing it. Yeah, we don't say handbag with a hard D, we say handbag. The sounds just blend together for efficiency.
Exactly. But in the Muqatta, that natural human blending is strictly forbidden.
Really?
You cannot merge the letters. Each letter must be pronounced sharply, distinctly, and individually, even if it feels physically awkward in the mouth to do so.
So you are forcing the mouth to slow down and separate everything.
Furthermore, many of these letters are subject to a rule called mad al-lazim, which is an obligatory elongation.
Elongation.
Yeah.
So you stretch it out.
You don't just say the letters, you have to stretch the vowel sound inside the name of the letter out for up to 6 counts.
So you aren't just quickly rattling off Alif Lam Mim. You are holding it. Alif Lam Mim.
Yes. It creates a prolonged physical vibration.
Wow.
The oral teachers pass down these precise phonetic instructions century after century. They protected the exact length, the exact tone, and the exact pause between these letters just as fiercely as the codicologists protected the ink on the parchment.
That is dedication.
It wasn't just about preserving a visual symbol. It was about preserving how that symbol physically vibrated in the air.
That level of care is just astonishing. But it brings up a really persisting question for me.
Go ahead.
We're talking about all these layers of preservation.
Yeah.
The ink, the sound, the math of the vocal tract. But what about the meaning?
The dictionary definition.
Right. How did the earliest Muslims, the actual companions of the Prophet who were hearing this for the first time, how did they deal with the mystery?
It's a good question.
Didn't it bother them that they didn't know what the letters meant in a literal sense? I feel like we live in an age where if we don't know the answer to something, we pull out our phones and search for it in 5 seconds.
Yeah, we do.
It drives us crazy to just sit with not knowing.
It is a very modern anxiety. We feel entitled to instant comprehension.
We really do.
The early Muslims and the classical scholars who followed them had a fundamentally different epistemology, a different framework for how they viewed knowledge.
Tell me more about that. How do they view it differently?
If we look at the earliest massive commentaries on the Quran, written by towering intellects like Al-Tabari in the 9th century, he was a master historian and exegete.
Okay.
When he confronted these letters, he didn't view the lack of a dictionary definition as a puzzle he had failed to solve.
So he didn't try to force a translation?
No. Classical scholarship categorized these letters into a specific theological bucket known as the mutashabihat.
The mutashabihat. Can you define that for the listener?
The Quran itself states that its verses are divided into 2 main categories.
Okay.
There are the clear foundational verses, the commands, the laws, the obvious stories. And then there are the mutashabihat, which are verses that are allegorical, ambiguous, or whose ultimate true meaning is known only to God.
So by putting the letters in that category, they were essentially saying, we know that we don't know, and we are perfectly fine with that because it reminds us that we are human and not divine.
Precisely. For Al-Tabari and others, this was not a failure of intelligence. It was a deliberate exercise in intellectual humility.
That's beautiful.
It was a recognition that if a text is truly divine, it must, by definition, contain elements that exceed the processing power of the human mind. If you could completely comprehend God's speech, it wouldn't be God's speech.
That is a very profound way to look at it. The mystery is the point.
Yes.
But did they just leave it at that, God only knows, and move on? Or did they try to figure out how the letters function structurally?
They looked incredibly closely at the structure, because even if you don't know the translation of a word, you can look at the context clues around it to see what job it is performing.
Right.
And there is a massive structural clue in the text itself.
I am looking at the list of the 29 chapters right now. What should
Huh.
I be looking for?
Look at what happens immediately after the letters in almost every single instance.
Okay, let's see. Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2. It starts, Alif Lam Mim. This is the book about which there is no doubt.
Yes. Keep going. Look at Surah Yusuf, chapter 12.
Alif Lam Ra. These are the verses of the clear book. And Surah Kaf, chapter 50. Kaf, by the honored Quran.
Do you see the pattern?
Every single time, the letters are immediately followed by a statement that points directly back to the Quran itself.
Exactly.
They're attached to an affirmation of the book's divine origin. I never noticed that connection before.
In nearly every case, the muqadda'at serve as an introduction to a vindication of the revelation.
Wow.
Because of this, classical scholars realized that these letters function mathematically and structurally like a royal seal.
A wax seal on a letter.
Exactly. When an ancient king sent a decree across the empire, the wax seal at the top of the scroll didn't contain the actual instructions or laws of the letter.
Right, it's just the stamp.
The seal's only job was to prove that the document was authentic.
That is brilliant. You don't need to be able to read the intricate Latin or Arabic carved into the wax seal. You just need to recognize the distinct shape of the stamp to know, okay, this letter is real. The authority is legitimate.
The early scholars recognized that these letters were the Quran's signature on itself. They authenticate the text.
That makes perfect sense.
And beyond authentication, they also seem to physically organize the book into specific thematic folders.
Thematic folders, like grouping chapters together based on subject matter.
Yes. The scholars noticed that surahs, starting with the exact same letter combinations, often share deep thematic DNA.
Can you give an example?
The most famous example is a cluster of 7 chapters, running from chapter 40 to chapter 46. Every single one of them begins with the exact same 2 letters, Hamim.
Oh.
Scholars collectively refer to these chapters as the Hawamim.
And what do those 7 chapters have in common?
They deal extensively and intensely with themes of the end times, the nature of the afterlife, and deeply philosophical arguments dismantling polytheism. They share a very specific tone and vocabulary.
And are there other groups like that?
Yes. You have a cluster of chapters starting with Alif Lam Ra, such as Surah Yunus, Hud, and Yusuf.
And what do they cover?
These chapters are heavily dedicated to laying out the detailed chronological narratives of past prophets.
It is like ancient metadata.
Metadata.
They act almost like physical tabs in a massive filing cabinet. If you are a reciter memorizing the book and you encounter a Hamim, your brain instantly knows, okay, we are entering the section concerning the hereafter.
Right. It is a highly organized structural system.
It is stunning. But, as we mentioned earlier, human nature being what it is, intellectual humility and structural organization aren't always enough for people.
No, they rarely are.
We love a secret code. Tell someone this is a mystery known only to God,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a challenge.
Yes, the impulse to pull back the curtain is very strong.
And that leads to a lot of false trails. I'm looking at some of the more modern phenomenons, and you see people applying heavy numerology to these letters.
Ah, yes. The numerology theories.
Using things like the Abjad system, where every Arabic letter is assigned a numerical value to try and predict future events, or the very famous Miracle of 19 movement, where people use computer programs to find hidden mathematical grids in the letters.
That impulse has always existed on the fringes, but it certainly surged with the advent of computers. However, it is an approach that traditional mainstream Islamic scholarship politely but very firmly rejects.
Why the firm rejection? Is it just traditionalists being resistant to modern math and computers?
No, it goes much deeper into the core theology of the religion. First and foremost, Islam strictly, unequivocally forbids fortune-telling, divination, and any form of sorcery.
So trying to use the Quran to predict the stock market or the end of the world violates the actual rules of the text itself.
Exactly. Attempting to use the Book of God as a crystal ball fundamentally misunderstands its purpose.
Right. It's not magic.
It is a book of moral, legal, and spiritual guidance. It is meant to guide human behavior, not serve as a puzzle box for producing parlor tricks.
I can see why scholars would push back on that.
Early titans of scholarship, like Ibn Taymiyyah and Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, explicitly warned against playing these numerological games.
Because it cheapens the message. If you reduce the Quran to a math trick, You lose the moral weight of what it is actually saying.
That is the theological objection. But there is a second, highly practical reason to reject the numerology approach, and it brings us back to our code ecology, the physical parchment.
What happens when you test the math theories against the physical evidence?
They crash into a wall.
Really?
When modern enthusiasts try to force these complex mathematical models to work, like the idea that every letter count is perfectly divisible by the number 19, they find that the text doesn't always cooperate with their spreadsheet.
So what do? Do they abandon the theory?
Rarely. Usually, to make their math work perfectly, they have to start selectively counting letters.
Oh, wow.
They have to ignore certain ancient spelling variations. Or, in the most extreme cases, they actually argue that the ancient manuscripts must be wrong, and they try to alter the text to fit their numerical theory.
Oh, that is dangerous territory. Yeah. They are bending the physical evidence to fit their preconceived theory instead of letting the evidence guide them.
Exactly. They abandon the physical reality of the early parchments to protect a modern mathematical assumption.
That's backwards.
It is. And the irony is, by getting obsessed with forced numerical patterns, they miss a much more profound, undeniable miracle that is staring them right in the face.
Okay, I am leaning in. What is the real miracle here that the numerologists are missing?
Think about the nature of historical transmission. If you have a massive book-length text that is copied by hand, century after century, spreading across thousands of miles from the mountains of Yemen to the libraries of Andalusia in Spain, all the way to Indonesia, what is the one thing that is absolutely inevitable?
Human error. It is the ultimate game of telephone.
Exactly.
Scribes get tired by candlelight. They misread a messy word from the master copy. They accidentally skip a line. Or they think they spot a grammatical mistake and decide to fix it to be helpful.
Things morph over time. But, as we saw in the Sana palimpsest, the muqatta at these disjoint letters do not morph.
Right. They stayed exactly the same.
They are absolutely, terrifyingly stable across the entire early manuscript tradition.
Okay, wait. I think I see where you're going with this. Let me try an analogy.
Go ahead.
Imagine you inherit a very old family heirloom. Let's say it is a silver ring from your great-great-grandfather, and carved into the silver is an inscription in a language you completely do not understand.
Yeah.
Now, if you are asked to draw a replica of that ring, because you don't know what the inscription says, you are going to copy every single curve, every single scratch, every single dot with agonizing precision.
Yes, you would have to.
You wouldn't dare change a line because you don't know what you might be breaking. But if you knew the inscription just translated to a common word like flour, and you were copying it down late at night, you might absent-mindedly write the word wheat by accident.
Right, because your brain processed the meaning, it got sloppy with the form.
Alhamdulillah.
You have articulated the exact core of the preservation paradox.
The preservation paradox. So not knowing the meaning is exactly what saved the physical text.
That is exactly what happened. The scribes across all those different continents, living centuries apart, copied sequences of letters they did not fully possess a dictionary definition for.
Wow.
Because they didn't have a simple human meaning attached to them, they had absolutely zero incentive to editorialize.
They couldn't clean them up. They couldn't substitute a flutter.
They were forced into absolute rigid submission to the physical shape of the transmission. They had to pass down exactly what they received.
That is mind-blowing. The lack of understanding became the ultimate protective armor for the text.
The fact that these strange, unexplained sequences survived entirely unaltered, without ever being standardized away or fixed by well-meaning scribes, is the ultimate forensic proof of the Quran's flawless historical preservation.
It is physical proof.
It proves that the early community did not meddle with the text. They passed down the mystery exactly as it vibrated in the air and sat on the page. The mystery preserved the architecture.
The mystery preserved the architecture. I am going to be thinking about that heirloom analogy and that paradox for a long time. It really shifts the whole perspective from frustration to awe.
It demands awe.
It does. And if you are listening to this, I want you to think about your own relationship with information today. In our modern world, we are completely obsessed with having instant answers to every single question.
We really are.
We walk around with supercomputers in our pockets. We hate the feeling of not knowing something. It feels like a weakness or a failure.
We feel entitled to total comprehension of the universe.
But perhaps the greatest gift of these missing dots, these 14 disjoined letters, is that they force us to stop and sit in the discomfort of the unknown.
That is a beautiful way to phrase it.
They stop us at the very door of the chapter, like a guard, and they say, "You do not know everything. Before we are allowed to read the clear guidance, before we get the laws and the stories, we are asked to lower our egos. We have to admit our own human limitations, look at the letters, and just surrender to the mystery.
May Allah grant us success. Come on, let's go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.